As we were working on this session over the last couple of months, we kept coming back to three things. First, the importance of looking at inclusion through the lens of students. And then each time we looked at through the lens of students, it also became important to look, well, then how does that affect the teacher, and what does that make us understand about the teacher's role in relation to inclusion? And then the third point that brought those all together was how much inclusion is a mindset that supports teachers to plan for all students. So we really kind of came to see it as sort of an organic process, that if you have some knowledge, that you can really start to have the teacher and student perspectives really coming together closely. And so with this in mind, we wanted to begin with the reason why we're all here, which is students. And thanks to the Halifax Regional Centre for Education, we were able to, and then two of our colleagues on the team were able to make some segments of a great video from the Halifax Regional Centre for Education to create some video clips of what it means to be fully included in school and learning. And so to preface the video, we wanted to just say there's no better advocate for the deep impacts of teaching by the principal's inclusion than the students themselves. And that's what this video really illustrates. In their original video, we're just going to take a few seconds to go through it because they had, because we segmented it, we sort of lost some of the context. So we just want to give you a sense of what you're going to be seeing. The first is about personal well-being, then the academic benefits for inclusion, Mi'kmaq teachers and cultures being experienced by all students is the next segment. Then there's a really neat segment about student engagement through flexible seating options and choice. I really like this one because you think it's such a simple change, but it feels like it was a completely different classroom. So, and then there's the really impressive high school Afrocentric math cohort at Auburn High School. And then a Cabs Cafe, which is Inclusion Beyond the Learning Center. And the final clip is about the importance of relationships and intellectual engagement. So we'll ask Susan to put that up for us now.
I've learned that after enough tries, you'll eventually get it right.
We learned like her culture and how to speak in Mi'kmaq languages. Favorite thing was the smudging ceremony.
I felt very calm after I got smudged. Like all the bad spirits were gone.
We've got tons of options in here, everything from bar stools and a custom-made table to some comfy beanbag chairs. Tons of office chairs that kind of roll around and scoot around so you can swivel and swerve. Some lawn chairs, some cozy pillows, exercise balls, some moon chairs, lowered coffee tables, lamps to set the mood.
I would describe it as like a really fun place to learn, as it gives you more space for thinking. Here you can choose whatever helps you learn best, and you can sit in a different place with different people each day. It's like helps to do teamwork.
It helped you to feel comfortable and stay focused.
It feels even better than a classroom. It feels like a major living room.
It's recess right now, and all of the kids are still engaged. They're still collaborating with their friends. They're still bouncing ideas off of each other.
It feels like wonderful that you can choose on see every single day from Monday to Friday.
Confident about myself.
Get to move around and do stuff that you don't normally do in your classroom.
I feel like that's the thing that makes me not like school a lot. Just sitting in a chair and not being able to like move around while I'm doing stuff.
My math marks are like better than they've ever been before.
I feel like I've become more confident and just more comfortable with like how I learn as an individual, and like I can express myself better.
I feel like I learned a lot about myself and like where we come from because of this class.
So like I feel I can take on bigger things now.
Extremely proud. I don't think I'd be like who I am now, this outspoken and this confident within myself if I didn't go into the cohort.
I never really knew that there were black people doing these things. Like I never really had dreams of being like doctors or anything like that, because I don't really see it like go on around me and stuff. But like it opened up my eyes to like be whatever I want to be. Sky's the limit.
These students know what's away. When they're in the kitchen, they're like totally different people.
Teachers and students know that we can do things more without telling us no.
Because I'm telling you, this cafe has allowed a lot of them to find that self-confidence, get all those potentials out, and show us really what they're made of. And our invitation says you're invited to celebrate our students' successes. And that is exactly what this is all about, celebrating their successes.
I came from Syria 3 years ago. In our schools, like in Syria, we don't do anything extra. We don't do like work like with our hands or stuff. We just sit in the class and listen to the teacher. But here it's so different. And the last 3 years I've been working in makerspace with Mr. Watt. This definitely made me know what I'm gonna do after school, which is mechanical engineering, and I love it.
Throw them in a room and give them stuff and let them tinker and fail and learn together, and amazing things happen.
I hope I meet more teachers like him in my life.
I think he encouraged Mustafa to trust himself, to work with confidence, to look for what he wants to do and to pursue it. Now Mustafa is going to Dalhousie University.
I think Mr. Watt changed my path to a better way, and I really appreciate that.
Great. Thanks, Susan. So now I want to turn the mic over to Ange Sanford.
Hi, everyone. So while Susan's bringing our slide deck back up, my name's Angela Sanford. I prefer to be called Ange. And as Jodene mentioned, I work in LRTS. I'm the coordinator of distributed learning. And I want to share with you the thoughts of creating an inclusive classroom right now. So I want everybody to put their, we're going to go back into the classroom thinking caps and get into your own headspace for a moment. And I want you to think about inclusive education. It's about what is necessary for one is being good for all, right? So that's one of the key concepts. What's necessary for one is good for all. And as teachers, we need to be intentional and purposeful in our planning, and that includes specifically planning for an inclusive classroom, intentional and purposeful in how we create the classroom to be inclusive for all. So in thinking about those things, I want you also to think about a time in your own experience, whether it's in your own studies, whether it's in your own classroom, whether it's a classroom you've been a part of, whatever it might be, but when all of the students were deeply engaged in their learning, right? So thinking about the video that we were just looking at and thinking about those, we're going to take you to a Jamboard link. I'm going to pop that Jamboard link into the chat box. And when we go into it, you're going to see these 4 questions as titles in there. So how were the students organized? What ways were they interacting with you, with each other, with the teacher, if you were observing that classroom? What is it that was about that learning? What was it about that learning that was so engaging for all students? What was the energy like in the room? And what did you learn from this experience? So I'm going to take you over to the Jamboard, and Sandy, our moderator, Sister Moodle there, has got a link to the Jamboard.
No, I'm sorry, that's the wrong link.
So just above that, I have a link there as well for the Jamboard. I just thought he'd put the same one up. So if we click into that, I'll get Susan to click into the Jamboard for us on the screen here.
And then, Ange, we all click into it to go over?
Yes.
So it's the tiny URL, not the YouTube.
Everybody clicks into that Jamboard session. If you haven't used Jamboard, I would say a couple of people are very comfortable with Jamboard. They're already popping things in. So you'll see those 4 title questions are there, the sub questions. Off to the left in your toolbar, you'll see the 4th one down is a sticky note. Just grab it and pull it onto the screen and type whatever you want to put in, and add your thoughts underneath one of the questions. What's going through your mind right now? What are you reflecting on? Do you have something to reflect on all 4? So we'll give you a couple of minutes to do some reflection, and then we'll take a look at what's there. That screen is filling up quick, isn't it?
Yeah, it's
Which is
amazing.
terrific. Yeah, and some people are better with the tools on here than I am. I had forgot to mention that you could certainly add your thoughts by crafting a comment or using the pencil tool to add whatever you might want to add. But look at the things that we're seeing in here. When how do students interact with one another? Looking at taking risks. Positive. They have positive vibes. They access knowledge, and they had help with and from everyone or anyone. Risk takers, group work, independent work, collaborative, flexible seating. All of those lovely things that are happening in there. And we think about the space, and we think about the interactions, and what's good for one is what's necessary for one is good for all. Those are definitely things that are necessary for us and good for all of us. What about the learning that was so engaging for students? They had visual aspects. There was choice of how to respond. It was fun and it was creative. It was authentic and meaningful. It was collaboration. There was deep conversation. They had their learning styles and preferences were being met. There was respect. They were making personal meaning. The mindset of the teacher. Learning was new for everyone. There's choice. There was project work. They were building connections. These are phenomenal things that we want in all of our classrooms, and looks like you've had great experiences to see what deep engagement looks like for students. Exactly. We win together. I like that visual. And the energy in the room, you can feel the energy even in these sticky notes, right? Positive, collaborative, and curious. They were focused. I love the room hums. Organized chaos, but in a great way. Total engagement, buzzing, happy, engaged, comfortable. See what's under the sticky note here. Fun, loud. They were talking, but they were really focused. So yeah, definitely that's the energy we get, and that's the energy we want teachers to have and students to have in that experience as well. And what did you learn? So our little metacognitive piece specifically here, relationships are easy when learning is authentic and engaged. How to better facilitate, and somebody agreed with that comment. When to leave my students alone and let them figure things out for themselves. It takes conscious planning to make learning meaningful for everyone. Sign of good planning, right direction for teacher, how to communicate between students, respect. How to let go. There's that gradual release. You've got to build that up, and we do that for ourselves as well. Teamwork. Students had a deeper understanding of the outcomes. I can't read the text on this one. My eyesight's not as good as it once was, but I do love the visual that goes there. So we've had some great experiences to build on. So the sessions this afternoon should be able to help you build on those thoughts and where you stand, and what you're thinking about what the experiences are that you've had. So we'll take Susan back to our slides, and Jodene's going to take over again.
Thanks, Anne.
That Jamboard will be linked the entire time, so you can go in and look at that whenever you like as well.
Okay, thanks. And I think it's really great that, like, when I was looking at it, plus having the video in mind, I think that's exactly where we wanted to start our time together, was having those two perspectives. And I want to just stop and thank to the few people who were able to complete our survey. We know in the group we have a range of experience with MTSS, and I just wanted to say, for those of you that know a lot about it, because a couple of people did let us know they've had a lot of experience, we want to invite you to please feel free to jump in if you have anything to share. You can do that in the chat box, or even just unmute and jump in with a comment at any time. For others who are relatively new to this topic, we heard that you would like to learn the following. What is MTSS? How to become more accessible or best help all students? Wondering if you are making any mistakes relating to inclusive education, and looking for practical ideas, especially in the areas of math and literacy. And so then, as you see here, we have a good fit. We're already on a great track, because our team set out these 4 learning intention was to introduce MTSS as a framework for implementing the inclusive education policy, one of the frameworks. Exploring high leverage learning practices that support all students within the MTSS framework. Apply these practices to a planning process that can be used for a lesson or an entire unit. And that was that really important part about making it practical. We didn't want to spend our whole time just talking at the ideas level. And then to invite and address any questions that you might have about MTSS and Tier 1 Universal Instruction. So now we're going to move to our first learning intention, which is to introduce MTSS as a framework for implementing the inclusive education policy, and we'll turn it over to Cindy Giffen.
Thank you, Jodene. Welcome, everybody. Some of you, I think, were in our session yesterday, and so you may hear some of the similar foundational ideas, and which is great because that just means that we're able to build on those today. So welcome, and I'm going to begin talking a little bit, just briefly, about our new inclusive education policy. Now, you've probably heard about the new inclusive ed policy over the course of the past year or so, and the soft launch that's been occurring throughout it. You may wonder what we mean by that. So I'm going to try to clarify for you. The idea of a soft launch was that the new policy would be gradually introduced over the course of the year and that we would begin full implementation in September of 2020. But of course, like all of our best laid plans this year, that was interrupted by the global pandemic. So we're coming back to what is the inclusive ed policy and some of the key big ideas of the policy. The first one that I think supports us so well in meeting our learning intentions for this afternoon is this one. With enough time and practice and equitable and responsive teaching, every student can learn. In other words, for us, it means every student is engaged, both intellectually and emotionally, and are part of everything in our schools. So if you go to the next slide, please, Susan, that would be great. So, MTSS, a mindset of inclusion. What does that mean? Let's have a look at an important component for supporting all students, which is embedded in our inclusive ed policy. The multi-tiered systems of support, or MTSS, as you often hear bantered around, is defined in the policy as an integrated school-wide approach which provides a structure for collaborating and coordinating our efforts and supports and interventions for all of our students. Now, what does this really mean? What does it mean in action? What does it mean in practice? It means that if we're going to provide equitable and inclusive education for all our students, we need to embrace a mindset, a special mindset, a mindset of collaboration and a willingness to plan intentionally for all our diverse learners. So what does having this mindset translate into? It means that by ensuring that the MTSS framework is evident in our schools and that it is driven by a mindset of inclusion, we can have an effective integrated Tier 1 or the universal interventions and supports embedded in all our classroom practices. And most importantly, we can connect these practices intentionally to Tier 2 supports and interventions, which are increasingly more focused and targeted to student strengths and learning needs. It also means that we're able to then develop specific individual interventions and supports at Tier 3 for students who require them. But here's another important, really big idea. At no time do we refer to students as Tier 1, Tier 2, or Tier 3 students. In other words, it's always about the types of interventions and supports and the practices that we're doing. So if we look at the third bullet on this slide, we talk about MTSS requires us to collaborate, to coordinate. to provide appropriate programming for students, to think about settings and the supports and services, and to focus on high leverage strategies, which we'll be able to talk more about after our break. Susan, next slide, please. So, what is MTSS? And what's in it for our students, most importantly? As we begin the implementation of our inclusive ed policy and MTSS, let's think carefully about who will be affected and by how, by the way we go about addressing our learning goals. Today, we're focusing on the foundational tier of MTSS, Tier 1, or our classroom practice. When we plan how we build effective, engaging Tier 1 for all our diverse learners in our classrooms, we embrace that inclusive mindset of universal design for building relationships with our students and their families. This universal design for learning, or UDL, as we sometimes call it around here, is a mindset, again, for planning, for assessing, for instructing through engaging learning opportunities. That's exciting. We sometimes hear universal design for learning compared to a beautiful buffet that's been prepared, hence the food on our slide. And also, some of you may have seen Katie Novak's UDL video around comparing with the analogy of the buffet. It's important because on this buffet table are choices for all of us. We can choose the foods we enjoy, the foods that meet our dietary needs, and most of all, we choose foods that help us create a feeling of belonging at the table. Likewise for our students in our classrooms. As we ponder the planning through an MTSS framework today, let us intentionally include many important high leverage strategies, such as those found in culturally responsive pedagogy, in trauma-informed practices, in restorative approaches, and in inquiry-based learning. All big ideas that are embedded in this work. We're now going to take a 5-minute break. Please remember to turn off your mics, to stand up and stretch, take your eyes off the computer. We'll be back shortly and ready to jump into a discussion on the use of high leverage strategies, which are critical for the planning for our students. Thank you. It's been fun. If you have further questions, if you have further questions on the inclusive ed policy or on the MTSS quick guide, please feel free to post it in the chat line and we'll be sure to follow up with you. Thank you.
Thanks, Cindy. It's Jodene. I just wanted to say those 2 links are in the chat box right now. If anybody hasn't seen the quick guide or the policy, you can download them. And so we'll come back. It's 1:34, so why don't we come back at 1:40 and we'll get started again then.